Today on Biblical Higher Ed Talk, I sit down with Jessica Lugo, Executive Director of the Association for Hispanic Theological Education, to discuss the growth that's happening in Hispanic theological education. Thank you for tuning in today. I'm your host, Philip Dearborn, president of ABHE, and this is going to be a great episode today as we have a conversation with Jessica Lugo. She is the executive director for the Association for Hispanic Theological Education. And for the purposes of this episode, we won't say that every time. They're better known as AETH. AETH is an organization that's committed to fueling theological education across all levels, at the institute level, at the college level, as well as universities and seminaries. And we have had an opportunity to have several conversations over the last several months. And I really think you're going to enjoy getting to know Jessica and what AETH does. We're going to talk a little bit about what is looking like some emerging partnerships that could happen between both organizations. She's an ordained minister with a passion to see the church well equipped, and this position fits you beautifully. So Jessica, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having us. And Philip, it's great to see you again. Thank you for the invitation and the privilege of being here with you.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk a little bit about all those things that I talked about at the top of the show. Before we do that, just so our audience can get to know you a little bit, Jessica, talk to us about a defining moment in your life. You're sitting now as the seat in the executive director of AETH. Talk to us about an experience that really kind of propelled you forward in that direction.
I always present myself as pastor, educator, and administrator, and it goes in that order. Being called to the ministry about 16 years ago after being in the finance industry for over 12 years when I was called about 16 years ago, I always had a passion for education. So after leaving the seminary, being a seminary myself and having the opportunity to teach at a seminary, I came across this book of history of Christianity that I had used as a student back on my seminary days. As I came across as a professor, something in me drove me to reach out to the author. And the author of that book is the founder of AETH. So this happened back in 2021. And I will always remember that moment as a defining moment where God put all the elements and factor in place to guide me to where I am today. Having the opportunity to first meet this person as a student, then as a professor, then as a peer, eventually as a friend, and now, as a colleague in ministry. Coming across that textbook of the history of Christianity, which is actually one of the courses that I am now privileged to teach, was definitely a defining moment to having me today as the executive director of AETH.
Wow. The lesson there is don't throw away your textbooks, right? You never know how God is going to use a textbook, right?
You never throw away your textbooks, especially those textbooks that for one reason or the other talk to you on meaningful, special ways.
Yeah. Just curious, is anybody in your family, were they involved in education? Were you kind of exposed to education growing up, or?
Only two aunts. They are teachers till this day at the high school level. So I do have two aunts that teach both English as a second language at the high school level. But on my direct nucleus family, I'm actually a first generation college student.
Wow. And you have earned doctorates, and you have business and finance background. And it's just kind of neat how God has used all of those things and prepared you for this moment. And you've been president now of AETH, or executive director, for how long?
A year and 3 days.
Oh, wow. So you're counting by days. Okay. I should start counting by days too, but no, that's great. That's great.
A year. It's been officially a year now.
Okay. And you had served on the board of AETH before that?
Prior to that, I served on the board 2 years as a secretary. Correct.
Okay. And so now, you've been in the seat now for a year. Do you feel like you have a good handle? Because I know a lot of time organizationally, it takes some time, especially in education or those that serve educational institutions, you kind of have to give it the year because of the cycle of all that happens. Do you feel like you have a good sense of what's in front of you?
I do. And actually having the benefit of being on the board prior to actually switching to the chair of the ED gave me some context of where the organization was on the transition period, because we were at a transition point that was definitely done with the entrance of the new executive director, which I'm very humble and honored that it was me. And yes, first year was a year of reconciling, of reorganizing, of understanding the new path that God had for us as an institution. And having completed that year sets us on an ideal position to actually start acting upon those goals that we have set for ourselves for the next 5 years.
Yeah, and you've put together a beautiful strategic plan, which captures a lot of that. So when I look at it and think that you've only been in the seat for a year, I think you've accomplished probably 4 years worth of work in this first year. So give us a context. We see all kinds of demographics out there, especially for college age students. The enrollment cliff that is real and shows that there's declining numbers of high school graduates, and those are students who are then eligible to go on to undergraduate and graduate. So we've been talking about this for a number of years and know that the demographic cliff is right in front of us. The one demographic, though, when you actually drill down and look at the statistics, is among Hispanic students, those numbers are actually increasing. So talk to us about what you're seeing trend-wise, the Hispanic church in North America. What are you seeing?
Well, when you read research, right, such as Barna and Pew Research, you definitely see that the Hispanic population is rising, and that trickles up not only to the church, but also to the academy, right? You see those upward trends within the growth of Hispanic population. So definitely growth on population. It's one trend that we are seeing, and we are discerning how can we better serve that growing trend of Hispanic population in the United States.
Pause right there, and you can come back to your other trends that you're seeing. Dispel for us a little bit. Like, we use the label of Hispanic, and when we fill out IPEDS reports, when our institutions do, it's like one category, Hispanic.
There's not a one size fits all.
Unpack that a little bit.
When we define Hispanics, we talked about first generation Hispanics, which are the ones who came directly from their original country. But we can also drill down to second generation Hispanics, which are the ones who were born within the United States, but shared values, principles, and cultures of Hispanics. And then you can even drill down to third generation Hispanics, which most of them are partially Hispanics from one side of the family and the other, and most of them don't even speak Spanish, right, when you go down to that, but they identify themselves as Hispanics because they still share the values, the principles, the culture, and everything that goes around it. And then if you want to keep digging and drilling into that, there's Central Latin American Hispanics, there's South American Hispanics, and when you go into the nature of South America, there's what they call Colo Norte, which is the north side of the continent, then the south side, which is the South Cone, and then you have the Caribbean. So, I mean, we are as heterogeneous could be.
Yeah. And I think that's a misperception oftentimes because the label is there of Hispanic, but when you start to drill that down, there are multiple cultures represented within that. And we know so much about education is culturally based, and that influences how you approach education, influences the church. And I think we have to be careful in using the label because it represents so much bigger than just a monolithic
Spanish-speaking
exactly
label.
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah. Continue on with other trends that you're seeing.
Yes. Well, other trends is actually the growth of a younger generation within the Hispanic population, and how we're seeing those rising generations wanting to have leadership roles. That's definitely great news for our Hispanic population, and how they are wanting to play active roles within their communities as far as social justice, but also religion identity, right? A third trend that we're seeing is how many are shifting into Protestant faith traditions. The growth of the Hispanic population and how that trickles down to the church, the community, the academy, then the younger generation as a second trend wanting to have a more active presence within their communities with social justice, with religion identity. And then the third trend will be the shift into Protestant faith traditions for those that are seeking spiritual formation and identification within their lives.
Yep. And we've seen the demographics that show that. I mean, the statistics demonstrate that the fastest growing element of the church in North America is among Hispanic people. So therefore, if the church is going to flourish, if the church, which is embedded in the communities, is going to have an impact, churches need leaders. Leaders have to be trained. And so that's really what our organizations are all about. And you've worked with several educational providers serving Hispanic students. Talk to us about the breadth of what you're seeing out there.
As a network that connects people and organizations, we work building bridges within the academy and the church, right? And in building those bridges between the academy and the church, we strive to connect Bible institutes, particularly, which are non-accredited educational institutions, which come in all shapes and forms, right? We have the Bible Institute that belongs to a local church, and we have, well, mature, organized Bible institutes that belong to denominations or belong to historic organizations that have been out there. We're seeing the growth trend among those Bible institutes. And what we do is we certify the quality of their content. And we assure that by our scope and access to organizations like ABHE, AETH, and others, that we can build pathways, right, for those men and women that are training and capacitating themselves to have access to a more formal education. At the center of our mission of promoting theological education within Hispanic communities, we try to be that bridge that closes the gap for many Hispanic men and women to have access to a more formal education.
Yeah. The majority of your members are going to be unaccredited, non-accredited Bible institutes.
Correct.
And in your relationship with AETH, you have a certification process that they can go through. But then you also have major universities and seminaries who are members of AETH. How are you serving them?
Yes. So become enablers, cultural enablers for them. We have 4 strong partnerships with big, what you would call, well-established universities and seminaries across, it's actually north, south, west, and east. Now that I'm thinking about it, we become facilitators in the ways that they can be more cultural aware and better Hispanic serving institutions to the Hispanic community. So we facilitate resources, we connect institutions and individuals. So we facilitate different type of resources in ways that they can better serve the Hispanic community.
And I would imagine having a network that has from very small, informal, non-formal, church-based Bible institute all the way through to major universities and seminaries, just being able to have one place where all of that is represented. I was able to attend a day of your biannual event back a couple months ago. And it's just amazing to see the breadth of what's represented there, but the support that's there for those Bible institutes, rubbing shoulders with college professors and administrators at larger institutions, and larger institutions looking at those Bible institutes as possible feeders into their schools. I mean, it feels like it's a great approach that you're providing, kind of that platform for all of that interaction to happen.
Correct. I mean, you couldn't have said it in better words, and that's what we are all about. It's precisely that bridge building that I was talking about, right? Sometimes the academy and the church can be so distant because of the nature of their institutions. We try to bridge that gap and assure that the academy can reach down to church, and the church can also see the academy accessible, right? Yeah. With everything that happens in between, for us to be able to enable those kind of connections.
Yeah. You and I have had a number of conversations over the last couple of months talking about what potentially could be some partnership, and anything that we're talking about, nothing is formalized yet, but we're pulling back the curtain a little bit just to say, hey, these are some things that we're talking about. And so one of the first, it's really a two-level partnership. The first partnership is basically AETH to ABHE. So talk to us about kind of what we've been thinking about, what you've been thinking about, ways that AETH can come alongside and assist and help and resource ABHE.
Again, the same way that we resource and enabled our current partners, right? It's how do we help and support institutions that are seeking to serve Hispanics become more cultural aware and become more cultural contextual in the way they serve, in the way they teach, in the way they approach Hispanic communities, right? You said this earlier, there's not such a thing of a monolithic label when we talk about Hispanics, and we try to bring that awareness, backed up by the expertise that precede us. We want to make sure that institutions that are seeking to serve Hispanic populations have the tools, have the resources, have the awareness, have the cultural relevancy for them to do it right and do it well. One of the things that we've been talking about for the last few months.
Yeah, and let's unpack that a little bit, because I know we have a number of existing ABHE accredited by ABHE institutions who are exclusively reaching Hispanic populations with all of their instruction in Spanish and are pretty well established. I'd say it's a small number, maybe half a dozen institutions that fit that category. But we have a number of institutions who have programs. So basically, they've taken some of their curriculum, a degree program or a certificate or whatever, and are providing that education in Spanish at varying levels of success. And I think that's maybe where I want to drill down a little bit, and where AETH could definitely help. It's not simply taking your existing curriculum and your courses and translating it English to Spanish. It's a lot deeper than that. So talk to us about that.
If you want specifics, examples, it could be faculty.
Yeah.
Right? It could be cultural awareness. At the moment that we are having this conversation, we have Epiphany coming up, which is January 6th. It's a huge thing within the Hispanic culture, and understanding that and being aware of that, and making the organizational culture aware of that. It's something that makes relevancy even more important within the Hispanic community. But it's about faculty, it's about support, it's about mentoring, it's about bibliographic resources, right? Those are the kinds of support that we provide for those institutions that are wanting or seeking to serve Hispanic institutions.
Yeah, well said. And there's a classification out there recognized by the federal government of Hispanic serving institutions, HSIs, which a number of our institutions are. Tell us about basically what HSI is.
On a nutshell, right, and I'm not an expert on it, but a nutshell, when the institution can prove that 25% of their registered population, it's Hispanics, and they then receive the HSI certification, which at the same time transfers to the access and possibility of federal funds within the organization.
Yep. So a number of our institutions, like I said, have that or are aspiring to it. The reason I raised it was because I think this is where AETH can really help ABHE institutions, or those that are like seeking to get that certification to have access into federal funds, that it's more than just meeting a benchmark of population of students. That if you want to serve Hispanic students on your campus, it's a lot deeper than just a threshold. We met the population and here we go. And it's similar, a couple of podcast episodes back, Mana University recruits heavily in the military context. That, look, if you want to serve military students, there's a culture that's part of that you have to understand. And the same as this, if you want to really truly serve Hispanic students, it means that you are going to have a much deeper knowledge and understanding. And it's not just one culture, it's multiple cultures. And it's understanding holidays, as simple as understanding what holidays are important, and not just simply taking your English-based textbooks and translating it direct to Spanish, because something actually is lost in translation. And one of the things that you're doing is you all have a library of resources, of theologically deep resources written by Hispanic authors to be used in theological educational contexts.
Yes, we do. And that's part of being cultural aware, right? And cultural cognizant of the populations and communities you're seeking to serve.
Yeah. So that was what we're talking about, basically AETH to ABHE. And then the second part is ABHE to AETH. And some of what we've been talking about, obviously, one of the main services that ABHE provides is accreditation services. And you mentioned that you have a number of institutions that are not accredited. Why would an unaccredited member of AETH be interested in accreditation through ABHE?
Well, that's a great question. We've been having this program for the last 12 years and seeing the progress and maturity of many of these institutions, right? Many of them, again, growth out of a church ministry that then formalizes into a, proper Bible institute. And through the years, that maturity process takes them to the point where accreditation becomes the next natural step. Us helping them understanding what does that mean and what kind of benefit and access would that provide to them and their students. For many of them, not all of them, but for many of them, it's just a whole different and new dimension of raising that quality bar of educational formation that they provide to their students.
Yeah. You said it beautifully, and that is the main benefit of accreditation. And there are several others that if they want to seek financial aid, Title IV funds, both in grants and loans, they have to attend an accredited school. So there's benefit that way. And like you said, not every Bible institute desires to be accredited. But what we're talking about is, are there a handful? Are there some that are kind of on that journey, that have gone through that certification process that you have in partnership with AETH, that they would say, hey, you know what? We're well positioned to go to the next level with it so that we can better serve our students and then seek accreditation. So that's kind of the second part that we've been talking about. Nothing formal yet, but we're just having conversations around it. You and I have talked about just it for such a time as this, that God put us together. And I truly believe, and I know you do too, in the sovereignty of God. He has a sovereign plan that he's working out. And in his sovereignty, he's brought us together to say, how can we make each other better as we're working to advance the kingdom of God? And I'm super excited about it. So those who are listeners out there, maybe your school has a HSI program or you're seeking to do that, then definitely you'll want to reach out and have a conversation with Jessica, because she can definitely help. She'll actually be at our annual meeting as well, doing some sessions, and we're looking ahead to some possible conferences that we would put on. It's all kind of being shaped and formed, and we really are looking forward to what God has ahead for us. So, Jessica, you have advanced well in your leadership, both in your preparation, but also your experiences within organizations. We have a lot of young listeners who are aspiring leaders, who are growing in their leadership. Give us a parting word of advice from your own experiences to encourage or challenge them.
Be intentional in anything you do and want. Be intentional. And I mean, when I say be intentional, mean it, work hard at it, pray on it, and, keep focus on it. Sometimes we want something, but we're not really intentional about it. But when we are intentional about it, we don't improvise. We truly work details along with God's direction to make sure we can achieve that goal. So make sure that's the plan that aligns with God. And once you're sure that's the plan that aligns with God, you have to be intentional on every single step of the way and keep at it and be resilient until you see the fruits of whatever goal it is that you're putting
Yeah.
yourself up to.
Yeah. That's such a great word. And I think it's a responsibility too that we have,
It
right?
is.
As Christ followers, that we can't just kind of,
Leave it up to,
hey, whatever
if it
happens,
happens.
happens.
Yeah.
Yep. That there has to be
Into-
some level of intentionality there. So thank you for sharing that, Jessica. This has been a wonderful conversation. Really appreciate you sharing a little bit about who you are, but also what God is doing through you at AETH.
Thank you. Thank you, Philip. Thank you for having us. May the Lord help us to follow his plans and bring the best to the communities we serve.
Great. And if you're interested to find out a little bit more about AETH and the work that they do, in our show description, we do have a link that you can go and check out AETH. And for those of you who are part of ABHE, be paying attention in the next several months as we start to unfold what is emerging as a partnership between AETH and ABHE. So until next time, stay kingdom focused.